The Women's Leadership Institute in the Auburn University College of Liberal Arts is pleased to present Leaders Educating Through Discussion. We hope you will take a moment after you watch our presentation to add your own voice to the dialogue on our website, auburn.edu/women's leadership.
I'm really delighted to be here for a lot of reasons. One is that I was here for the founding of the Women's Leadership Institute. I was here for the first time. They had a meeting, and I wrote about the women of Alabama and the book, Closing the Leadership Gap. And so I felt like I wanted to come back here. I leave for Italy tomorrow to do something, but my staff was like, don't go there. I said, no, I have to go because I got to see what happened, and it did happen well, so thank you. I'm glad to be here because I think that Lilly Ledbetter has done more for equality in this country than almost anybody in my lifetime through her life and her witness. So I'm so proud of her and what she's done and who she is. And I'm glad to be here because I had the opportunity to start my own life and work at a university, which was great. I was living in Des Moines, Iowa, and I'd had these 5 children. They kept coming. I don't know what I was doing, but they just kept coming. And suddenly I thought, I have to go out into the world to change it for my children. I started doing that. But a job came open at the university. And I thought it was wonderful. It was the first time they'd ever had a director of a division of women's programming. And I thought, I want to go and create everything for women that I've ever wanted in my life. So I went to apply for the job. And I want to tell you this because I think this happens, and I'll talk more about it later. So I went over and applied because, I knew some people over there. And all my friends looked at me and they said, Marie, you're never going to get that job. I said, why? And they said, well, you don't have a master's and you don't have a doctorate. And, oh, for God's sakes. And, of course, I got the job, of course. And it was wonderful because I got the privilege of working with a wonderful dean like you have. She's so much fun. And I got the privilege of working with somebody terrific who said, Marie, anything you can get funded, you can do. And boy, did he just open himself up. So I went out and said, I will do this. And what happened that was interesting was because I didn't know what you couldn't do at a university, I just got to build the best and the biggest division of women's programming in America at Des Moines, which nobody could believe. So we would go to Stanford and we'd go to these other places and they would say, how did you do that? And I said, I didn't know you couldn't do that. And of course, I got the dean in trouble with the university all the time, but mostly we got people brought to the university because what I did know is the university needed to be connected to the community. And it was a great lesson, and I want to tell you that because I will talk more later about how we give each other courage. But sometimes it isn't what you expect that actually gets you to the place you want to go or what other people expect of you. I want to talk to you today, though, about this whole issue of the importance of women's leadership. I came to it. I've had the privilege of doing wonderful work in my life, but I don't think I learned more than I learned through Take Our Daughters to Work. You do some work where you just really learn. And the first thing I learned through it was because it came out of the academy. It was research that came out of the University of Minnesota and came out of Harvard. And it was showing that something happened to girls at adolescence. It's when they, as AUW well knows, when they started to lose their sense of voice and think that they were only known for their, body as their bodies were maturing, and boys' bodies were maturing into strength. And girls started to not say things and started to turn into less resilient people. And there was a cure for that. It was about having adult women and adult men around them that gave them a sense of resilience. So we worked for 2 years to find a way to do it. And I want to say something about this because it started with research. And we put the research out there. And for those of you who are researchers, the first thing I learned is that if you put research out that says something is wrong, it's really good if you can give people something to do about it, because they actually don't want to hear it if you can't work out something. So we took the research around. People like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that's too bad, although they did know something was wrong. But after a couple of years, when we came up with this simple program, which was take a girl to work. It didn't have to be your daughter. It could be anybody's daughter. That you thought it was a pre-adolescent girl, take them to work. And of course, amazing programs sprung up all over the country. Just to tell you another small story about how life will treat you if you happen to get to do something good, and that is we didn't expect it to be big. We thought it was going to be a little program in New York, and it got out in Parade magazine. And before we knew it, it went around the country. And people were so hungry for something to do that they started wanting to do it in droves. And there were 7 of us in a fax machine. So calls came in. We put the answering machine in somebody's home. And the woman who answered the phone would say, "Take our daughters to work day." And the person would say, "I'd like to speak to the workplace organizer." By the way, they thought we were big. So she would put the phone down and pick it up and say, "Workplace organizer." That's the way it went. I mean, if you do innovative things, sometimes you just have to tap dance. And I learned also about controversy. I don't love controversy, but the controversy of Take Our Daughters was always about what about the boys? And the minute the first little girl walked out of the workplace, the hue and cry went up, what about the boys? And I have to tell you, I have sons and daughters. I care about the boys. And what was interesting, though, is the controversy around the boys actually made Take Our Daughters over the years the best boy program in America because it really got people thinking about boys. It not only changed a lot what happened with girls in this country, but it actually got people thinking about boys in a different way. And I won't tell you all my experiences unless you want to hear them with boys, but it was important information. But this is the best thing I learned and what really took me to working on the issue of women's leadership. And I learned it from a little girl who came to work the first time we ever did the program. What they did all the time was when the programs were over in the companies, they would have the women who were the top people in the companies stand up in front and talk about how wonderful it was to work at their company. And so this woman who had had a 10 or 11-year-old girl was standing up and, "Oh, it's so great to be at Brooklyn Union Gas," and blah, blah, blah. And she finished her speech, and the little girl was in the audience, and she looked out at the little girl who, she said, "Are there any questions?" The little girl said, "Yeah." She had followed her around all day, right? She said, "I noticed your job was boring." And the woman said, "Well, perhaps it's a little boring." She said, "Well, didn't you ever want to do something else?" And the woman said, "Well, actually, yes, she had." She said, "Well, what did you want to do?" And she said, "Well, I had wanted to be a singer." She said, "Well, sing me a song." And right there in front of this group that had never seen this woman as anything but a buttoned-up executive, this woman belted out, "Memories like the corners." Oh, Lord. I started to cry. I started to cry because all I could think of is our daughters are watching us. Our daughters and our sons, I think, and they ask us what songs we have stopped singing and what parts of ourselves we leave out when we go out into the world every day. And they call us to bring that back. And I think that's what started me on the kind of journey about women's leadership, because I thought in 2 ways. One, as a democracy, what parts of us are cut off from active work in this democracy and power? But as individuals, how do we create institutions? How do we create places for people to be in this country, in these companies, in this world, where people can bring all of themselves into it because we need it? I'll tell you one thing, and of course what occurred to me since I was at the Ms. Foundation for Women, and I had been watching women in this country create policies and programs all over America that were changing things in terms of wages. They created the living wage campaigns. They were changing things around how health care was delivered. They were changing things about violence in their communities, but they weren't getting the places they needed to get because they weren't sitting in the seats of power to make that happen. It would bump up against the legislature. It would bump up against the city council or the county commission, and that would be it. And that's when I realized if we want a community, a country that sings all its songs, and say, then we have to get enough women alongside men into power so that it really is that kind of community, so we have more choices. I was very happy this last week at the Fortune Summit. There's a Fortune Summit they do every year, and all the powerful women are there, and some of us too. And the ones that get listed on the list, and Warren Buffett was there. And I just, if you don't know Warren Buffett, you will, because there's a bill named after him right now, the Buffett bill, because he's trying, actually as a millionaire, to get taxed, which is an unusual thing for a millionaire to do. And he was sitting up there, and he was being interviewed, and I loved it. He said, he said, actually, it's an amazing thing that our country is as good as it is. He said, because think of it, we've only used half its people. We've only used half its people. Think about where we would be in a country if we had used the women of this country. And he said, my sisters were smarter than me. My 3 sisters, they were smarter than me. They were loved as much as me, but they weren't expected. They weren't seen as people who would have that opportunity and would take that opportunity. And I was like, I told him, I said, nobody should be rich and smart and funny and say the right thing. I mean, I was so glad. So that's what I'm talking about, not women going into the workplace or going into power or into Congress to take the place of men, but to lead alongside them so that we really change things so that people can bring themselves in.